Right, greetings everybody for tonight's weekly wilderness webinar on a very interesting topic. Can people pleasers build team trust? And maybe we can expand that to, can people pleasers build trust in relationships? They have such a lovely strength in being able to connect and really be so amazing as friends in terms of feeling like they really pay attention to you and really come alongside you in the things that you need. But it's an interesting topic that we're going to engage with. So my name, as you know, is Mandy Young, and I'm a psychologist and an eco-psychologist. As a psychologist, I like to take a journey, especially with people who are really motivated to grow, to heal, so that they can make a difference. So I really love working with those kind of people. And as an eco-psychologist, I've spent a lot of time observing wild animals or social behavior, swimming with dolphins, walking and talking with the Maasai and the Bushmen, and they have taught me so much. I think in terms of this topic, often the way we orientate ourselves in life depends a lot on how our brain has started to function and develop to help us adapt to life. And we have parts of our brain that are very well represented in the wild animals and reptilian species and animals that we can come alongside, but they just show the process in a much more pure and clear way. It's a wonderful springboard for discussion and a wonderful way of remembering the things that really work for us or don't work for us, a great source of wisdom. So the way it works is that I have Debbie Hayes with me tonight, which is a big privilege. Debbie is known as the Queen of Clarity. So she's also a coach, a life coach, a psychologist, and she also likes to walk alongside people, take a journey with them, and really help them to be empowered to be the best that they can be. So lovely having you here, Debbie.
Thank you, Mandy.
Okay. So how it works is if you're watching this video or Debbie, I'm going to play you a short video and we're going to launch the discussion from that place. Obviously, the video is chosen to kind of highlight our topic, and we've got an intriguing little animal that we're going to be observing, little insect. Well, I don't know what you call caterpillars actually. Not in the biology arena, fully qualified in that area, but it's an intriguing little caterpillar. So while you're watching it, just jot down any thoughts, any feelings, anything you notice, any association it brings up for you. There's no right or wrong in this. And we will just chat and discuss around our theme after that. I'm going to share my screen with you and I'm going to share the video with you. If you can't hear the video or anything like that, let me know.
I've finally found a caterpillar that I've been wanting to meet for a long time. This is the best caterpillar in the world. Kind of looks like a dead stick. Until you annoy him. He turns into a perfect little viper. Thrashes around as well. There you go. He puffs up those eyes. They fill with air. They've even got the white spots that look like reflections in the eyes. And people are scared of these around here. You can see why, but the funny thing is it's when he's upside down. He looks like a snake.
In 2001, the unthinkable happened.
Okay, so quite a short video. Any things that kind of stood out for you right from the beginning? I know it's easier for me because I've watched it and had time to stop and start it, and this is the first time you're watching it.
Yeah. I think as that guy said initially, is that it looked like a stick insect, so the camouflage was really clever, wasn't it? But then when it needed to, well, it felt as though once it needed to protect itself, it came out, didn't it? And morphed itself into presenting itself into a different way and a different shape as well.
Yeah.
It really was quite significant to me. You know, from being
Yeah,
a
I
stick
found
to
those kind of things quite interesting as well. Like,
yeah,
first of all, it looks like a dead stick.
yeah.
And for me, in terms of our topic tonight, when we're thinking about people who are good at pleasing other people, often they're well camouflaged. You know, their colors, their flair, their shapes, their character doesn't stand out because it's camouflage, you know, trying to please other people. And so sometimes their creativity, their unique attributes are just hidden, you know,
Yeah.
in that effort.
Yeah.
I think I quite like that part where it says, until you annoy him.
Yeah.
You know, that's when the change kinds of happen. And I
Yeah.
think, again, in terms of our topic, when people are constantly trying to gain connection, I think, from pleasing others instead of really considering their own needs, who they are. I think they get really exhausted and they get
Yeah.
really depleted. I
Yeah.
think they're also often suppressing their true feelings. So that builds up a lot of anger.
Yeah.
You know? So when they finally get to their last notch and you press their buttons, you know, you're going to probably experience a whole lot of anger, which might be a bit surprising after they've been so accommodating and sweet and sugarcoating everything. So I quite like that little aspect as
Yeah.
well. And I think what I like about watching wild animals, or it gives you such a visual picture of how things happen. You kind of have it in your head.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
much more so and much more experientially than as if you were just reading a book or that's what I really like about learning this way.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
but I quite like the part where he also said people are scared of you. Because I think, interestingly enough, when people are often very good at trying to please others, other people don't quite know whether they can, that what they're saying is really what they mean. You know, they don't know if they can really trust that what you're saying, what you're doing, what you're presenting of yourself is really truly what's going to come out. So they're not quite sure how to align themselves with you. They're not quite sure how to position themselves with you.
Yeah.
And that can be a little bit vulnerable, a little bit scary. You know, that for me was that people can be quite a little bit scared of you, not because you like being vicious and aggressive, but just because you make them feel a little bit vulnerable because they're not quite sure how, you know, often people say, oh, I just said how it is, you know, and sometimes you feel, oh, actually, I quite like that. At least I know
Yeah.
exactly
You know where you
what's
are.
going
Yeah.
on with it. I know exactly, know where I am with that person. But with somebody who doesn't quite say what it is, you know, you kind of hear somebody saying something, and then you hear somebody's emotion behind it.
Yeah. And the
And
little
the
bit
two
of
don't
congruence.
quite match. And it
Yeah.
leaves you feeling very dissonant, very uncomfortable, and not quite sure which one to respond to. You know,
Yeah.
it's kind of like if somebody says, right, we're going to take this very seriously. You know, it's like, what? Serious? They look like they're
Yeah.
joking you around.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, what do they really mean? You know,
Yeah.
yeah. So, but I think the thing that you kind of pointed out, Debbie, is that the caterpillar was camouflaged.
Mm.
So there were aspects of it adapting in that kind of way that actually was a strength. You know, it actually could protect itself maybe from being eaten, or protect itself from whatever was aggravating it. So often with people who are very motivated to please other people, there are aspects that it's a really good strength.
Mm-hmm.
They can be very connecting, they can be kind, they can be friendly, they usually really like people.
Mechanism as well, isn't it?
It is, it is.
Mm.
And I thought that's a very valuable point, because I've recently been doing some very interesting work, which you might be interested in, with somebody called Coach Shazad on positive intelligence.
Oh,
and he talks about how we develop certain ways of being. Our brains adapt in a certain way, usually as children, when we are having to deal with disconnects, with trauma, with people saying horrible things about us. You know, nobody goes through childhood without anything that kind of impacts them in some way. And we develop ways of kind of adapting to that. It's called our survival brain. And there are strengths in our survival brain, and they definitely serve us well in certain situations. But it's kind of when that survival brain goes to the next level, where we compromising ourselves because we're being too people pleasing, we're exhausting ourselves, people don't trust us. You know, that's when actually that's not really going to be very helpful. And it's quite interesting where people pleasing comes from, the survival function for that is often from a situation where people have needed to get attention and acceptance through helping others to even be noticed, or even have value, or even have people pay attention to them or connect them. You know, kind of like, I must meet other people's needs ahead of my own just to survive, or I must give love and affection in order to get any back. I must earn it. You know, I'm not just simply worthy in my own right. And so I quite like the work that we both do, you know, for somebody to really use that strength, but to also not take it beyond where it then becomes very unhelpful. I think core to that is core to not always wanting to connect through pleasing other people is having clarity about who you are. Because when you have clarity about who you are, you know, you kind of have a passion. And out of that passion, sometimes it doesn't matter what other people think. You're just going to go for what is really, really important to you.
Yeah, and true.
And I think what comes out of that is also courage, you know, because I think what also happens when people are very involved in just orientating their lifestyle to please other people is that they don't address conflict very easily. You know, and if you don't have the courage to address conflict, that again is something that kind of leads to distrust. And when you don't have the courage to say how you feel, you don't put up boundaries, you know, that kind of protect yourself, and boundaries that say, okay, this far, no further. So I think, and when you have that kind of courage, you're not afraid what you say, you can set boundaries, you can face conflict. So I think very core to that is gaining clarity about who you are. And I think that's the work that you do, that's the work that I do. I must say, I have found it very helpful if you want to engage with this at any stage, or if anybody listening to this video wants to engage with this at any stage. what Coach Hazard has done, he's written a book called Positive Intelligence, which is a New York Times bestseller. And what he's done is got down to the very basics of how our brain functions and how we operate. And he calls a lot of what comes out of our survival brain our saboteurs. And one of the saboteurs is people pleasing.
Absolutely.
And he has really, he's got an operating system that he has mobilized onto a mobile app, and goes through some really great ways of moving from the highway, the neural pathway, which is your survival brain, to building a new neural pathway into much more essential and much more wide areas of our brain, and encouraging things like empathy and problem solving, and being very focused in our action once we gain that clarity. But a lot of the ways in which he helps that shift, to have another neural pathway that's more like the highway, and the saboteur way becomes more like a trickle, is to really do things that actually very much stay in your body. So it's lovely techniques that get you to just really stay in your body, and ways that just really reduce levels of stress and levels of cortisol in our brain and our bodies, that's caused by those ways of thinking and behaving that don't work so well for us. So we talk about being a people pleaser, it affects our life by compromising who we are, by creating distrust in relationships. So we do want to move to not losing all those strengths, the good aspects of it, but also moving to orientating ourselves in much more mentally resilient ways, more mentally creative ways, more ways that are more truly and essentially ourselves. So that is most of what I have to say tonight. I don't know if there's any other comments you want to make, Debbie.
Yeah, I mean, I've been studying a lot to do with trauma over the last couple of years, and it very much fits with the need for our bodies to have a regulated nervous system. And so it really does fit with those same principles. And I can see from my own lived experience, I have definitely been a people pleaser, and I feel that was very much a trauma response. Having studied trauma, that was the safe way to survive.
Absolutely.
And as you very correctly pointed out, actually one key function is to really know ourselves, and through that there's need then to validate ourselves, because part of that trauma response seems that if we weren't validated, and therefore we almost had to operate as other people wanted us to operate, then we've got to again validate ourselves. So if that's not happened at a core age, there is quite a lot of soul searching, I would say, needs to happen, and that sort of real honesty with yourself. As to is this really mine? Is this somebody else's? And so yeah, there's a lot of unpicking perhaps to do to really understand, like, what is your patterning. But I think when you see the pattern, it's so much easier to spot it as well in other people. And yeah, and it's just very liberating, I think, to be able to take that ownership back, of all of you, because we've got very different spectrums, haven't we, as humans, as we should have,
Sure. Thank you so much, Debbie, for sharing your own sort of vulnerable part of your own life, but also just raising the importance of gaining some self-awareness. Because often when you have that self-awareness, and you notice what's going on inside of you, it's easier to kind of make some different choices. And I think you're right, you know, it is kind of a trauma response, you know, because rather than getting totally ignored or sidelined, you know, at least you feel noticed if you're meeting somebody else's needs, you know, they're going to want you. The sad part, I think, is then you kind of may tend to get, I'm not saying this about you personally, I'm just saying generally, you may tend to get into relationships that are more dependent, you know, always needing you to meet their needs.
Oh, absolutely. I ended up in an abusive relationship, and this was really what was the key to me going, oh, how have I got into this situation? And let me get to the roots of this and really understand, why did I even attract that situation? And it was, and then this is how I sort of really discovered that in my formative years, that was my default pattern, because you know, that was really the only way that we were allowed to operate, is, well, certainly how it felt. That's how it felt. So yeah, there wasn't much room for my needs.
Yeah, and so I guess as a child, it met some of your needs. You at least somehow stayed connected with important caregivers, somehow got recognized. But I think that it didn't serve you well, maybe later on in relationships and who you chose as a long-term partner, etc. But I think there's a quote by Alice Miller, who was a psychologist in the late 1970s. This always stuck with me because it seemed so pertinent. She said, the greater the hole in my mother's heart, the bigger the hole in my mother's heart, the greater the jewel in her crown I needed to be. So often, when parents themselves come from a very empty place, not really knowing who they are, and they needing to validate themselves by having this really perfect child, you know, things like that, you know, or they have got a lot of emotional trauma going on, and you have to be constantly taking care of them. You know, you have to adapt your life in a way to kind of meet that parent's need. Otherwise, if that parent's need isn't met, who's going to look after you? You know, so it's tough, you know, but I think it's really valuable that we have chances to grow and to mature and start again through that place of growing in self-awareness and clarity.
Yeah, and I think it allows you again to shine that perspective for other people who are starting to notice that something is off, or that there's those dynamics that they can sense is there, and then when you can put it into simple terms for them, then they can start to see where that is, or perhaps why that might be somebody's default mode.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for joining me tonight, Debbie. If you want to find Debbie, you'll connect with her on LinkedIn under Debbie Hayes.
Thank you.
If you want to be part of these weekly wilderness webinars as we discuss very important topics by engaging our wildlife associates, our wildlife partners, that's probably the better word. Please just go to my website, wildernessencountersafrica.com. There's a little box that pops up there that you can just click on if you want to submit your email, and I'll send you the details. If you would like to engage with some coaching with either Debbie or myself, you're very welcome to contact me that way, or Debbie via LinkedIn. I just hope that some of what we shared tonight will really help those going through the same kind of life adaptation that's not really working for them. So thank you very much, Debbie. Lovely to connect in with you again, and hope to see you again sometime soon.
Yeah, that'd be lovely. Thank you, Mandy.
Okay. Bye.
Bye bye.